One of the things that I recall when I first came to the foundation and just began working in this field was a saying that if you meet one foundation, you've met one foundation. So sometimes we have our own kind of nuances in terms of how we approach the work. Some have biannual grant cycles, some do it 3 times a year, some do it 4 times a year, some do it monthly. It just all depends. So in the case of the Sisters of Charity Foundation of Cleveland, we do have quarterly grant cycles, but there are some distinctions in that. So going back to how we approach our grant making, again, 80% of our portfolio, give or take, really is directed to our strategic investment areas. So within those areas of housing, health, and women religious in particular, program officers have set a strategic framework that really guides the overall grant making and strategy for that particular area of work. So it may be that the program officer needs to do 2 grant cycles in any given year. They might need to do one 3 times a year or 4 times a year, or maybe not at all. It depends on where they are in the overall life cycle of their strategy for the work around ending homelessness, reducing health disparities, or supporting the work of women religious. But with that, if and when there is a grant cycle, it is usually released via invitation. And so what that means is that we do a lot of due diligence up front. We spend a lot of time in the field, understanding the context of the environment, talking with leaders who are doing the work on the ground, engaging in research, and really trying to, again, figure out those strategy points to get us to goal. And then with that, we kind of assess the landscape of nonprofits that have the potential to align with what we're doing in terms of mission and strategy, and then extend an invitation for them to compete for funds. And I do emphasize the word compete because, again, there's limitations to the amount of funding, and we really look at our grantees as partners. So in addition to the resources, it really is about working in collaboration and context with the foundation around these shared issues of interest. So moving forward through that process, you receive an invitation, you have the choice to submit a proposal. That proposal comes back into us. We've been pretty good about transitioning mostly everything electronically. We were a little slow to do that, but we're finally there, and that makes it a little easier for us. Then there's an internal review process. More times than not, we also engage with an external review committee too, again, because we're thinking much more strategically, and so we have other stakeholders who are helping inform us around some of these issues. Then funding decisions are made, and then really you begin on this journey with us. So it's not congratulations and we wish you well, but it's really a shared relationship that we enter into, where we're offering learning to you and technical assistance. We're learning things from you, as well as you're experiencing and implementing the grant, and so on and so forth. So that's a great question. Again, we recognize the limitations in terms of the amount of funding that we have available to reinvest back into the community. But I think what we've learned from being a much more strategically focused foundation is that there are other elements that are just as valuable that we can offer. So all of the staff provide a significant amount of technical assistance to nonprofits via those who are participating in our strategic initiatives, and just sometimes others who are seeking some guidance or some TA around a particular issue. Convening has been a very big tool that we've been able to utilize, and so again, I just used the recent example of the housing summit that we had here in the community, where we were both able to bring not only a national expert, but bring together the local community who is interested in this issue, and really begin to lift up learning and promote models and advance a conversation around a very critical issue that's impacting young people who are aging out of the foster care system. Other opportunities that we offer are, I would coin it as continuing education. So we have been known to do field trips to really, again, build understanding around issues. So when we entered the space of education, There was a lot of internal learning that needed to happen internally, but we also wanted to continue to build the capacity of our partners. So being that we were going to be working with the schools very closely and looking at models like the community wraparound model, we decided that it would be important to do site visits and educational visits to other communities who've been able to implement these models successfully and really understand what does that look like on the ground, talk to the teachers who have been experiencing these changes in their classrooms, engage with administrators who've been dealing with the policy issues. So we've done field trips to, was it Vermont, I think, and then they also went Cincinnati and a few other places. So those types of things we do provide from time to time, again, to build capacity and learning. And I think the networking piece too. So we've been very fortunate to not necessarily have to be behind our desk all the time. So being that we have the ability to be in the community, be engaged in conversations, experience, conferences and things in other cities and other places, it allows us to build a pretty extensive network. So we get to bring that knowledge back and share it with others who are working in various spaces. So most times than not, we might know somebody who knows somebody, and we're happy to pass that information along as well.
A couple other examples of convenings that come to mind are last year the Cleveland Museum of Art had the Truth Booth and the conversation, the African American male experience in the United States. And so it was at the Cleveland Museum of Art and the museum in University Circle, as well as the Transformer Station on the near west side. And so in Central, we held a local conversation, and it was the only site outside of the museums where it was in a neighborhood, and did a panel with African American male leaders and modeled the same thing, only African American males could ask questions as well as answer them. And so again, as though we don't have the opportunity to do grant making within the Promise neighborhood, we do. That experience was so rich. It was a really, really powerful experience for everybody to come together in a room and to create a safe space to have an honest conversation. Another opportunity where we did this was with the Maltz Museum of Jewish Heritage. They had an exhibit on women in the Holocaust. And there's a couple of Catholic women religious who were a part of that. And so we did an education program, and there's a sister who's on the East Coast who is a Holocaust expert, and she came in and did an educational session and had this very rich conversation with the Catholic and Jewish community. And so looking for those kind of opportunities to move the needle a little bit in terms of the cultural and social understanding. I came into the philanthropic world about 1.5 years ago, and two things that I've found out that when people say, what is it like? I say two things. One, money does very funny things to people. It's really, really hard. And so we, as Teleange said earlier, it's how do we really see grantees as a partner, and we're all pieces of the pie. Understanding money is an important part, but if the people weren't on the ground doing the work, it would be all for naught. And so really trying to break down those barriers and to see it as we're circular and not hierarchical. And the other thing that I always say is it's early on, and when I came into it, somebody made the very important clarification to me is the difference between output and outcomes. And we are really good as humans as outputs, and especially in the nonprofit sector. And I speak of that from my own experience. And in the philanthropic world, it's outputs. What are we doing? We get so caught up in the day-to-day, but really looking at what are the outcomes and what are the goals that we are working to achieve. And at the end of the day, we're both, whether we're on the grant seeker or the grant making foundation, grant making part of it, we're asking those same questions. What are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and can we do that together? Is this a fit to do it together? So that piece between output versus outcome is a really, really important question to ask for everybody sitting in this room.